There's a crack running along the eastern promenade of Palm Jumeirah that wasn't there 14 months ago. It's not dramatic. You wouldn't notice it jogging past, but if you kneel down and measure it, and someone has multiple times, it's growing at roughly 2 centimeters per month. That crack doesn't make headlines. It doesn't trend on social media. But it tells a story that $12 billion has failed to silence. Dubai, the city that built itself out of the sea, is quietly losing a battle with the ground beneath it, and almost nobody is talking about it. Let's start with what's visible. Across several sections of Dubai's most iconic coastal developments, engineers and residents have begun documenting subtle but persistent changes. Uneven pavement along waterfront walkways, pooling water in underground parking structures that were bone dry 2 years ago, hairline fractures creeping along the facades of residential towers built on reclaimed land. Individually, none of these would raise an alarm. Together, they paint a picture that infrastructure experts have been warning about for over a decade. According to a 2023 geological survey conducted by researchers at the University of Birmingham, one of the few independent studies on Dubai's coastal subsidence, certain reclaimed land sections along the Palm Jumeirah and parts of Dubai Marina are experiencing measurable subsidence rates of between 3 and 5 millimeters per year. That might sound small, it's not. Over the lifespan of a building engineered for stability on solid ground, that kind of incremental settling creates compounding structural stress. Doors that don't close, pipes that shift, load-bearing walls that develop microfractures invisible to residents but deeply concerning to structural engineers. And here's what makes this different from natural geological settling. This land wasn't here before. Humans created it. And the way it was created is the root of a problem that money alone cannot fix. Between 2021 and early 2025, Dubai's Department of Infrastructure quietly approved 17 emergency remediation contracts totaling more than $12 billion. And not a single one was announced publicly. That figure comes from a compilation of procurement records, contractor filings, and leaked budget documents reviewed by multiple regional investigative outlets. The contracts cover everything from deep soil stabilization injections beneath luxury towers to emergency seawall reinforcements along reclaimed coastlines. Some of the work is visible if you know where to look. Construction barges anchored near the outer fronds of the palm, crews working at odd hours on coastal barriers, sections of beachfront mysteriously closed to the public for scheduled maintenance that lasts months. Now, to be fair, Dubai officials have publicly attributed some of this activity to routine infrastructure upgrades. A spokesperson for the Roads and Transport Authority stated in late 2024 that ongoing coastal works are part of a long-term resilience strategy consistent with global best practices. And that's true to a point. Every coastal city invests in maintenance. But the scale of spending here, relative to the age of these structures, tells a different story. You don't spend $12 billion maintaining infrastructure that's working as designed. You spend $12 billion fixing something that's failing faster than anyone predicted. To understand why this is happening, you need to understand one thing about Dubai's coastline. Most of it didn't exist 40 years ago. The Palm Jumeirah, the World Islands, vast stretches of the Dubai Marina waterfront, all of it was built on land reclaimed from the Persian Gulf, using a process called hydraulic dredging. Massive ships pumped millions of cubic meters of sand from the ocean, floor onto designated areas, shaping it into islands, peninsulas, and buildable plots. At the time, it was celebrated as one of the greatest engineering achievements in modern history. And in many ways, it was. But here's the part the glossy promotional videos never mentioned. Dredged sand behaves differently than natural land. It's loosely packed. It hasn't been compressed by millions of years of geological pressure. It settles. It shifts. And under the right conditions, particularly when loaded with the weight of skyscrapers, hotels, and residential towers, it compacts unevenly, creating differential subsidence. That's the technical term for when one section of ground sinks faster than the section next to it. And differential subsidence is, according to geotechnical engineers, far more dangerous than uniform settling because it creates lateral stress on foundations that were designed for vertical loads. There's also the issue of what lies beneath the sand. Dubai's coastal bedrock is primarily composed of soft carbonate rock and ancient coral formations. These materials are porous. They erode. And when you dump hundreds of millions of tons of sand on top of them, they compress in ways that are difficult to model precisely. Multiple engineering studies, including one published in the journal Marine Georesources and Geotechnology, have flagged concerns about long-term substrate integrity beneath reclaimed areas. The studies don't say the buildings are going to collapse, but they do say that, without continuous, expensive intervention, the rate of settling will accelerate, and that's exactly what the remediation spending appears to confirm. One critical factor that amplifies all of this is rising sea levels in the Persian Gulf. According to data from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, sea levels in the Gulf region have risen approximately 3.2 millimeters per year over the past 3 decades. Consistent with global averages, but uniquely threatening to a city where vast sections of prime real estate sit barely 2 to 4 meters above current sea level. When you combine rising water with sinking land, you get what scientists call relative sea level rise. And by that measure, some of Dubai's most valuable coastal properties are losing ground at double the rate that global sea level figures alone would suggest. Let me put that in real terms. A property that sits 3 meters above sea level today, on land that's subsiding at 4 millimeters per year, while the sea rises at 3 millimeters per year, is functionally losing 7 millimeters of elevation annually. Over 25 years, that's 17.5 centimeters. Over 50 years, well, within the intended lifespan of these buildings, that's 35 centimeters. More than a foot of lost elevation. In a flat coastal city with no natural drainage gradient, that doesn't just mean wet basements. It means redesigned drainage systems, elevated roadways, reinforced seawalls, and, eventually, very difficult conversations about which properties are still viable. Fatima Al-Rashid has lived in her apartment on the Palm for 6 years, and she swears her balcony door used to close properly. It's a small thing. She mentioned it to building maintenance twice. The first time, they adjusted the hinges. The second time, they replaced the entire frame. 3 months later, it was sticking again. Her neighbor, 2 floors down, has a different complaint. A persistent damp smell in the guest bathroom that no amount of ventilation seems to fix. Across the corridor, another resident noticed a fine crack in their living room wall that appeared sometime last winter. None of them have connected these observations. None of them know that a geological survey flagged their building's plot as experiencing above-average settling. And that's the human dimension of this story. It's not dramatic, it's not cinematic, but talk to the people who actually build these structures, and the tone changes. A senior construction foreman, who asked to remain anonymous because he still works in the industry, told a regional outlet that during the construction of one major waterfront tower, his team flagged inconsistencies in the soil compaction tests to project management. He says the response was to retest using different parameters until the numbers passed. Whether that account is representative or an isolated case is impossible to verify independently, but it echoes a pattern described by multiple construction workers and mid-level engineers across several projects. Pressure to meet deadlines and budgets that sometimes outweighed pressure to investigate inconvenient geological data. Again, these are allegations, not proven systemic facts. Dubai's construction industry has evolved significantly, and current building codes are among the most stringent in the Gulf region. But the buildings constructed between 2002 and 2012, during the most aggressive phase of reclamation-based development, were built under different standards. And those are the buildings now sitting on land that's had 2 decades to settle. Dubai's leadership is not ignoring the problem. That would actually be easier to criticize. What they're doing is more nuanced and, in some ways, more concerning. They're spending enormous sums to manage a condition they publicly insist doesn't exist at the scale engineers describe. The $12 billion in remediation spending is real. The coastal reinforcement projects are real. The soil stabilization campaigns are real, but the public narrative remains relentlessly optimistic. Dubai is growing. Dubai is thriving. Dubai is the future. And look, There's truth in that narrative too. Dubai's economy has genuinely diversified. Tourism numbers rebounded strongly after the pandemic. The tech sector is growing. The population continues to increase. Nobody credible is arguing that Dubai is about to collapse into the sea. That's not the story here. The story is about the gap between what's being said and what's being spent. The story is about a $12 billion line item that doesn't appear in any tourism brochure. The story is about a city that's engineering its way out of a geological problem in real time and hoping the math keeps working. And for context, Dubai is not alone in this. Jakarta has been sinking for decades. Parts of the Indonesian capital drop up to 25 centimeters per year, so severe that the government is relocating the entire capital city. Venice has spent billions on the Mosey flood barrier system. New Orleans lives behind levees that everyone knows are a temporary solution. Coastal cities worldwide are grappling with the collision of human ambition and geological reality. Dubai's version of this collision is just younger, faster, and built on a foundation, literally, of unprecedented artificial land creation. The difference is that Jakarta acknowledges the sinking. Venice has turned its flooding into part of its cultural identity. New Orleans rebuilt with subsidence as a core planning variable. Dubai's approach, at least publicly, has been to frame every remediation effort as proactive innovation rather than reactive necessity. And that framing matters because it affects how investors, residents, and insurers calculate risk. If the official position is that there is no subsidence problem, then there's no subsidence risk to price into real estate valuations. The remediation budget will be a little larger. The sea will be a little higher. And the sand beneath some of the most expensive real estate on Earth will have settled a little further. The question isn't whether Dubai can survive this. It almost certainly can. It has the resources, the engineering talent, and the political will. The real question is whether anyone will be honest about what it costs and who ultimately pays. Because right now, that honesty is the one thing sinking faster than the ground. If this investigation opened your eyes to something you hadn't heard about before, subscribe. We track infrastructure and development stories like this one across the globe, and the next update on Dubai's coastal situation is already in the works. Drop your thoughts in the comments, especially if you've lived on the Palm or in Dubai Marina. What have you noticed? What's changed? Those ground-level observations matter more than any satellite data. Hit the bell because this story is still developing. And I'll see you in the next one.